So you've probably seen the news now, seen Charlie Kirk assassinated. And I've already been in a really bad mood about it. And then people say, oh, it's something in the news, doesn't affect you personally. It's not like I knew the person. But seeing the Ukrainian girl being stabbed in the neck, just sitting there minding her own business, leaves war-torn Ukraine to come here for safety and a new life. And she's just sitting there on a train with her headphones on, minding her own business. And one of the usual suspects just pulls out a small pocket knife, jams it in the side of her neck, severs her carotid artery. And at first she doesn't even understand. Like, she's just confused and like, ow, my neck hurts, and wondering what's happened. And she's dead within 60 seconds. And not a single person on that train helped her while this guy's walking around with blood dripping off the knife, bragging about how he got a white girl. And it's so symptomatic of what is going on in the country for years now. Lawlessness in our inner cities, BLM, Antifa, California not charging people for stealing less than $900. Like, liberal policies are killing people left and right. And the media is not outraged by it. In fact, it was almost nobody covered the story until Fox made a big deal about it in social media. Conservatives on social media made a big deal out of it. That CNN then ran the story about, this murder caused a firestorm among conservatives. Meanwhile, that media was openly supportive, and people were out protesting to keep an MS-13 gang member who beat his girlfriend and was here illegally to make sure that he got to come back to the States. If you're a Democrat, at what point, I don't disagree with Democrats and everything, but at what point do you become ashamed and embarrassed to call yourself a Democrat? You're the party of the criminal. You openly support criminal gang culture, all that stuff. You support Iran. You support Hamas. You're anti-Semitic. We have levels of anti-Semitism in this country that we've not seen since the Third Reich. And it's all liberals. It's all Democrats. It's all lefties. And you see people out there like Charlie Kirk trying to make a difference. Now, you might not agree with his politics. You might not agree that he's religious and preachy. You might not agree with some of his views on the LGBTQ whatever agenda. But Charlie was a guy. It's amazing to me that this even happened. Well, I guess I shouldn't be amazed. I'm more shocked than anything. He didn't do anything wrong. You might not agree with his politics, but Charlie was a guy who went out of his way to have conversations with people. He wasn't a shock jock. He didn't get up there and say crazy, outrageous things. He didn't call names. He never threatened violence. In fact, when people would throw rocks or sodas in his face, he turned the other cheek. And he did it with some grace. He tried to have a sense of humor about him and himself. But his crime, if you will, was being effective. Charlie started a movement, much the same way my wife brought up Martin Luther King did with civil rights in the black community. Charlie started a movement on college campuses, which for the last 50 years have been liberal indoctrination centers, shaping the minds of people to become worker bees and slaves to the system. And he went around there and he used the power of persuasion. He read a lot of books, he memorized a lot of stats and figures and documented them and would provide them to you. And he would go up there with this whole change my mind. Steven Crowder did the same thing. Change my mind. Because he realized that dialogue was important. And he knew you weren't going to agree on everything. But he used to say this a lot. I've watched thousands of hours of him over the years. Always found him entertaining, even though I'm not really religious at all. And so some of the stuff, when you get a little preacher, I'm like, all right, whatever. But his message was always that People should sit down and have a debate. It doesn't matter if you're on a college campus, if it's you and a coworker, if it's a husband and a wife. When people stop talking, that's when bad things happen. And even if you're not going to see eye to eye, it's important for people to sit down, have conversations, exchange ideas, give perspective, explain why you believe what you believe. And sometimes you may be right, sometimes you may be wrong, but it's important for society to have those discussions. And when we don't, everything gets pent up, and then it comes out often as violence. Most of the violence in our country is not from my side. It's not Republicans, it's not white people, it's not conservatives. The overwhelming majority of violence and homicides and death and mayhem in our country comes from the left, political and otherwise. Do you think that the guy who stabbed the girl in the neck was a MAGA guy? No. You know, when you look at Antifa, BLM, a huge, high percentage, way higher than their representation in society, of the mass shooters in the last few years. And an alarmingly high percentage of them have been trans, gay, non-binary, and all that stuff. Do you think those are MAGA people? Other than January 6th, what have you got? And even there, it was a disruption. It was stupid. The only person that died that day was an unarmed white woman that was shot in the neck by a trigger-happy Capitol Police agent. So when you look at the majority of crime in this country, it's not coming from the right. The violence isn't coming from MAGA. I was looking in Gemini. I use, instead of ChatGPT, I like Gemini. I pay like $20 a month because the nuances between AIs, some are better at conversations and the nuance of conversations and things like that. But what Gemini excels at is data analytics. It's Google, right? 56.7% of the homicides each year, so well more than half, are committed by 6% of the population, the black community. They vote 93% liberal, Democrat, not MAGA. Another 15 and change percent is Hispanic. Boggles, get out of there. Don't tend to be MAGA. That's 70% of all the homicides in this country committed by blacks and Hispanics, not white people. White people only commit 23%. And yet we're over 60% of the population. And even within that 23%, it's kind of a 50-50 split between, Democrat and liberal. So you run the numbers, it's around 88 and 90% of all the homicides in this country, all the murders are committed by people that would be Democrats or supportive of Democrats. And it's a big problem, and it's getting worse. And I don't know where this ends as a society. Because if you're out there preaching peace and love like he was, if you're out there saying, look, we're not going to agree, I'm not trying to agree on everything, but let's go and have a discussion. You, sir, you're the one holding up the sign that says you disagree with me. Come to the front of the line. Here's a microphone. Let's have a discussion. Let's be respectful. Let's not call names, even though they could be yelling and cursing at him and throwing a soda at him. His response would be like, oh, real mature, and he'd move on to the next. That guy was just assassinated because he doesn't agree as liberals and leftists agree. Trump was shot in the head, in the ear. He happened to move his head a little bit to the left and avoided having his brains splattered all over the crowd. And 2 other people were shot that day because he's fighting for a better America. Again, whether you agree with him or not, he's trying to crack down on crime. He's trying to put America first and stop us from being taken advantage of at trade deficits and things like that, and trying to give some power back to parents to control more of their kids' lives and letting school administrators make decisions on their behalf. So they tried to shoot him in the head, and then another guy was going to shoot him at a golf course. All this stuff that's going on isn't MAGA. The people that are firebombing and shooting at car dealerships and blowing up Teslas. Those aren't MAGA. So for the media to sit there and talk about MAGA this and MAGA that and right-wing extremism, where is the right-wing extremism? I don't see it. I don't see people being mowed down. I see people on all the riots and the stuff going on campuses and all the anti-Semitism and all the little liberal kids running around talking about committing genocide and against Israel and wanting to see Israel burn and supporting Hamas and terrorists and wearing terrorist gear. Republicans aren't doing that. Trump's not doing that. Charlie Kirk wasn't doing that. I don't know where this ends, because there's only so long that it can go on where you've got liberals and Democrats just openly murdering and assassinating people that they don't like their words. Someone says words they don't like, so they go take a gun and shoot them. And it's the same side that's always talking about gun control. The biggest thing we could do to lower crime and enact meaningful gun control that would make people safer would be if Democrats and liberals weren't allowed to own guns. Or people that belong to groups that typically vote liberal and Democrats. Because that's where 90% of our violent crime comes from. It's from the left, or those that would be aligned with leftists, if they bothered to vote. You can look at the demographic data, you can look at generations of historical data, and it bears this out, and those are facts. And facts don't care about your feelings. Facts don't care about what you want. They are what they are. You might not be even gravity, but if you jump off that roof up there, you're going to find out real quick, gravity's real. And, seeing a 31-year-old guy that's out there trying to have meaningful discussions on college campuses. He's got 2 little daughters, got a wife, and their dad just got shot in the neck and murdered on TV in front of a crowd of a few thousand people for trying to make the world a better place. Not preaching hate, trying to have conversations, trying to talk to people, trying to win hearts and minds through facts and a logical argument instead of shouting you down and calling you names and using violence to try to sway you. He tried to have conversations, and they fucking killed him for it. And I say they as the left, the same party that marches in support of Hamas, supports Iran having nukes, supports the eradication of Israel, supports everything going on in the black community and white people being killed. The same people that are outraged about George Floyd, who turns out died from a fentanyl overdose and cardiac arrest from a panic attack while he was being arrested, and thought it was okay to burn cities and shoot at cops and do billions in property damage and assault motorists and shut down highways and set up autonomous zones. Those people then sat there and watched a woman bleed out on a train and were like, whatever, it's just another white girl. No big deal. But if you would reverse the race card in that video and it had been a white guy stabbing a black girl in the neck, Charlotte would probably be burned to the ground by now. And yet 50% of Americans don't seem to have a problem with this. There's people on Blue Sky. That's where everybody went once Musk took over Twitter, and so all the liberals realizing, hey, they don't have an echo chamber anymore, that the other side wasn't going to be silenced anymore. They went to Blue Sky, and there and on TikTok, they're all cheering that a father and person that was out there just trying to have conversations with people was assassinated. They're jumping up and down for joy. They were pissed that Trump wasn't killed. That's the American left. I know there's a lot of Democrats that might watch this and go, well, it's not me. You're part of that group. It's no different than if someone else was a member of the KKK, but maybe they weren't as radical as the guy who's out there doing the cross burning and lynchings, but they're still, identifying as being in the KKK. That's how you should feel if you're a liberal today. This is your party doing this. This is your party doing mass shootings. This is your party burning cities and 90% of the bad stuff you see when you turn on the news, when it comes to homicides, crime, murders, all that kind of stuff going on, and certainly the vast majority of political-based violence, that's your modern Democrat Party. That's your Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Gavin Newsom. You're all on that team. And you can say, well, I don't believe their beliefs. You're on their team and you let them stay on your team. If you got a bad apple on your football team who's out there on the field saying racist shit or, fighting dirty or doing whatever, cheating, you don't keep him on your team and say, well, yeah, he's on my team, but I don't want to associate with him. If you keep him on your team, you associate with him. You're tainted by that person's actions. So, if you don't want to be associated with that, then you need to disavow yourself from them. You need to kick them out of your party. You can't keep them in your party and then claim not to be a part of it, or, oh, that's not me. So long as you keep them on your team, that's you. I would be embarrassed to be a Democrat today. I would be embarrassed to be a liberal. The problem is the kind of person who is a liberal and is a Democrat in today's world, what that party has become, they don't have that self-awareness to go, you know what? Maybe our side's taking this a little too far. A lot of us on the right didn't approve of January 11th. Thought it was stupid. It said so the second it happened. Even though in the end it wasn't that big of a deal, honestly. More people die every single Saturday night, on one night, in the one city of Chicago, than die in the whole January 6th thing. January 6th was 2.5 hours. There were protests that got out of control. There was some vandalism. In the end, everybody went home. And it wasn't that big of a deal. Really dumb, really bad for optics. But as far as the actual impact, it wasn't really an insurrection. It's just the closest thing that the left has to it. And I keep stuttering here because apparently my camera's doing some kind of gesture thing I need to turn off. Because every time I make a fist, I see something happening on the screen. I don't know if it's pausing or what, but bear with me. But what a shitty week. All kinds of stuff going on every week. Shitty. There's always somebody being shot or murdered and stuff, but we got more trannies out there shooting people, and we got to get out there trying to make a difference and talk to kids and be like, look, I have better ideas than that side, and here's why. Let me explain. Let me go through the facts. Let me go through this. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You sure as shit don't have to assassinate the guy. But that's what the Democrat Party's become. This is all too common, and I don't know how it ends. Because like crime on the subway and lots of other crimes we see going on, if the government doesn't step in and do the right thing and start cracking down, that guy should have committed already like 14 felonies, and they just keep cranking him out, putting him back on the streets. That person never should have been in a position to kill that girl. But because we don't do the right job, because in blue cities like Charlotte, we have zero bail, and just write the paperwork, another felony. All right, we'll go home. We'll see. Hopefully you show up for court in 4 months. In the meantime, they go rob another liquor store. They go beat somebody up. They carjack somebody, or they stab some girl in the neck. Liberalism kills. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, it literally kills. Because if they're not personally doing the killing, their policies are allowing others to do the killing. I don't see how you could call yourself a Democrat and think of yourself as a good person today. Not while you allow that shit to go on. And here's the thing, if government doesn't step in and take care of this and curb the crime and these kinds of assaults and things, at some point, you talk about, waking the sleeping giant. Right now, all the violence, or most of the violence is coming from the left. 90%. 90% of the homicides and murders and stuff are coming from the left. Well over 90% of the political violence lately has been coming from the left. That won't always be the case. At some point, People are going to get tired of not having results and feeling like their government isn't going to take care of this. And it's conceivable that some people would start taking shit into their own hands. And then you got a real problem. Because while certainly Democrats have guns, conservatives have a lot more. And a lot are ex-military, a lot are avid hunters and shooters, police, people that actually know what they're doing, and they outnumber the other side 20-1. This is a path that we don't want to go down as a country. You don't want another civil war. Some on the left claim they do. All I can say is be careful what you wish for. Don't wake that sleeping giant. Anyway, that's today's political rant, man. I'm legitimately upset and bummed, saddened, and really fucking pissed off by this, because every week you turn on the TV and it's just some other lefty loony doing some horrific shit, and no one seems to want to do anything about it. And it can't go on like that forever. Someone's going to have to do something about it. And I don't want it to be us. Nobody wants that. But at some point, you're going to make people feel like they don't have any other options. And then you're going to really see the shit hit the fan. We would be wise to avoid that. That's all I'm going to say. We'll see you guys.